Speak a bit more about the SABC's finances now. Bring in William Bird, the Director with Media Monitoring Africa, and joins us now via our video link. William, thanks for your time and your patience. Great as always to have you on. The sense I got yesterday is that many of the solutions to the SABC's financial woes lie in this bill, which has in some instances turned into a political football. Is that the case? Is that an accurate reading of the situation?
Well, no, whatever that is, if you're referring to the SABC bill, which the Minister has been trying to withdraw, that bill provides no answers. This is an issue that has been building and building for the last decade or more. It has been failed to be addressed by numerous ministers prior to the current one. And certainly the bill offers nothing in terms of offering any kind of solution for SABC. We do know that the current minister had put out, I think, a tender requesting for people to come in and do research on looking at an alternative funding model for the SABC. We hope that that process and that progress is being made in regard to that. We also know that, you know, the policy process has been stalled repeatedly. SABC is being expected currently to operate in a policy environment that's more than 2 decades old. If you think about where the world was 20 years ago and where it is today, I mean, it's chalk and cheese, especially in the media sector. The biggest changes we've seen globally have come in the media sector with the advent of social media, now with AI. SABC is being deliberately hobbled in order to prevent it from being able to function effectively. And then you've seen a repeated failure by the state and by Parliament to ensure that it has sufficient money to do what it needs to do. Ironically, the government was happy to give bailout after bailout after bailout to SAA and Denel and various other entities, but when it came to the SABC, they failed to give them a bailout. In fact, what they did do was they gave them a loan guarantee, which is a very different thing from a bailout. Loan guarantee says we stand stead for the money, you have to repay it, as opposed to the bailout. So SABC has been viewed as some kind of a football for those who seek to control it. We're gravely concerned about its current finances, and we know that something urgent needs to change, and that thankfully has been reflected in the most recent portfolio committee hearings.
Yeah, I was about to say that sentiment certainly reflected yesterday multiple times by some of the board members and the management at the SABC. I want to just hone in on that distinction you've just made between a bailout and what the SABC CEO called funding, right? A more sustainable kind of approach insofar as that relationship is concerned. And she made reference to how other public broadcasts around the world are being kept afloat, saying governments elsewhere, in fact, incorporate funding their public broadcasters as just part of their budget responsibilities.
I mean, and that is the case. It comes down to 2 simple questions. Do we want a democracy? If you answer yes to that question, then you'd say we need some kind of a public broadcaster, whether that's a public service content provider or public broadcaster as it stands, or in something that looks like it. What we know is that South Africa, currently we're number 1 in the content for world press freedom, according to the latest rankings, which is a spectacular achievement. If you look at the countries that fare better than us, indeed, if you look at the top 5, common to all of them is that they all have strong independent public broadcasters. If we're going to continue to improve and protect our rights to freedom of expression, we have to have an effective functioning public broadcaster. Now, what we also know is that news, which is one of the most critical areas, and in fact, most of the programming and public mandate issues that SABC has to fulfill do not make money. They can't make money, nor, in fact, should they actually be set out to make money. These are public services. What the SABC does is fulfill a critical public service. In the same way as we're seeking to provide free education and free healthcare, we must provide support and funding necessary for us to have a public broadcast entity that is able to fulfill and meet the public mandate. So our democracy depends on this, you know. So that means we have to be looking to say, well, where should that funding and that money come from? Now, there are lots of options here, and this is why we needed government to start doing research on this 15, 20 years ago instead of just recently. But still, at least they have finally started that process. What we need is a better policy. We need to be looking at those funding options, and they range from things of getting some resources, for example, from a potential proposed digital levy that may be imposed on some of the social media entities. There may be also a public interest levy that may be levied on different entities and services. And again, we need to look at ways of making sure that these things come from the public purse. If we are to have a sustainable democracy, we need an SABC.
Right.
If you don't want a democracy, then it's easy. Then you don't need one.
Loud and clear, and it's, I shudder at the thought of what that word looks like. William Bird, as always, great speaking to you. We appreciate the time and the insight. William Bird, Director with Media Monitoring Africa.